Welcome to Topic 9, where we will explore the concepts of aggregate demand and aggregate supply model and understand its significance in macroeconomics. We'll cover key concepts, factors influencing shifts, and their impact on the economy. In this session, we will cover the aggregate demand curve, aggregate supply curve, macroeconomic equilibrium, the impact of ADAS on income, and the business cycle using the ADAS model. The ADAS model includes three curves: the aggregate demand curve, the short-run aggregate supply curve, and the long-run aggregate supply curve. Aggregate demand represents the total spending on domestic goods and services in an economy at various price levels. It's a combination of consumer spending, C, investment, I, government spending, G, and net exports, XM. The aggregate demand curve slopes downward, showing the inverse relationship between the price level and total spending on domestic goods and services. A change in the price level, which is called the price factor, causes a movement along the aggregate demand curve. A movement along an aggregate demand curve is a change in the aggregate quantity of goods and services demanded. The inverse relationship between price and aggregate demand is influenced by the interest rate effect, real balance effect, international competitiveness effect, and exchange rate effect. Higher prices normally lead to higher nominal interest rates to reward or compensate savers for the effect of inflation has on the real value of bank deposits and loans. Higher nominal interest rates tend to reduce consumption and investment. Next, higher prices lead to a reduction in the purchasing power of household wealth. A loss of real wealth leads to less consumption. This is the real balance or wealth effect. International competitiveness effect refers to the situation where IGHER domestic prices, assuming no change in the price level overseas, make exports less competitive and imports more attractive. Therefore, the loss of competitiveness reduces the value of net exports. Shifts in the aggregate demand curve occur due to changes in aggregate expenditure and non-price level factors such as income, consumer preferences, and brand loyalty. Think about how different scenarios, like a stock market boom or changes in interest rates, can increase or decrease aggregate demand. Aggregate supply is the total output of all producers in an economy at different price levels, represented by real GDP. The upward-sloping aggregate supply curve, also known as the short-run aggregate supply curve, shows the positive relationship between price level and real GDP in the short run. The aggregate supply curve slopes up because when the price level for outputs increases while the price level of inputs remains fixed, the opportunity for additional profits encourages more production. In conclusion, firms make decisions about what quantity to supply based on the profits they expect to earn. Profits, in turn, are also determined by the price of the outputs the firm sells and by the price of the inputs, like labor or raw materials, the firm needs to buy. In the new classical model, there is a direct relationship between price level and short-run aggregate supply, assuming the economy is self-regulating. In a self-regulating economy, aggregate supply adjusts to changes in demand, returning the economy to equilibrium. This process is called long-run self-adjustment. How does it work? Well, when demand increases, consumers pay more for goods. Firms increase production to sell more goods, prices normalize, and output remains high. Wages and prices become flexible, production and employment levels change, the economy returns to its natural level of output. Short-run aggregate supply is affected by the change in unit costs of production, that is the cost of producing one unit of good or service in an economy. Short-run aggregate supply can shift due to changes in resource costs, government actions, productivity, and supply shocks. Any change that makes production different at every possible price level will shift the SRAS curve. Events like these are called shocks because they aren't anticipated. For example, if the price of labor unexpectedly gets more expensive. In response to that shock, the SRAS curve decreases, shifts to the left. Interestingly, this happens if firms expect that this will happen too. If consumers see it coming, they adjust their expectations accordingly. If factors of production get cheaper, or producers think they will get cheaper, then SRAS increases. In economics, long run is defined as sufficient period of time for nominal wages and other input prices to change in response to a change in the price level. the long run is not any fixed period of time. Instead, this refers to the time it takes for all prices to fully adjust. The idea embodied in the long-run aggregate supply curve, LRAS, suggests that, in the long run, the output an economy can produce depends only on the resources and technology that the country has available. Neoclassical economists believe that LRAS is fixed by the level of economic capacity and is independent of the price level. While in the short run some input prices are fixed, in the long run all prices and wages are fully flexible. Because of this flexibility, there isn't a long-run trade-off between inflation and output. Once prices have had enough time to adjust, output should return to the economy's potential output. Hence, the LRAS appears to be the vertical line at the economy's potential output, also known as natural rate of output. Long-run aggregate supply shifts right with increased capacity and left with decreased capacity, affecting labor participation and overall production. For instance, movement of labor will affect the economic capacity. Outward migration will lead to a decrease in potential GDP and vice versa. Australia has a small population for its landmass. A majority of Australia's output capabilities are from its capital. Skills and education of labor population are the determinant of productive potential changes, which contribute to labor productivity. Other factors that affect the economic capacity include level of technology advancement, productivity levels, economic incentives for supply side of the economy, infrastructure in an economy, and etc. Stay tuned for more insights and detailed explanations on aggregate demand and supply in our upcoming sessions.